Welcome to the live stream, everybody. It is so awesome to be here tonight. We have an amazing guest. As you guys know, Brent Elliot, Master Distiller of Four Roses, will be joining us shortly. Just to cap off an amazing first year, thanks to all of you guys, we were able to donate $40,000 to charity in July. It was an amazing thing, and none of it's possible without you guys. As you all know, thanks to Kim, well, Kim was a big part of it. We were lucky enough to get a Four Roses barrel. And that barrel alone, I mean, it obviously sold out instantly, as you guys know, but we raised approximately $4,500 on that barrel towards charity. So that's awesome. Also amazing. And tonight we get to taste that barrel with Brent Elliot. So Josh, Kim, Dusty, how are you guys?
Doing well.
You guys
Doing
excited
great over here
tonight?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Very much so. I'm excited every time I get to drink this bottle, to be honest with you.
I know. Yeah, me too. It turned out so good. You guys all should have your bottles now. Those went out maybe a week or two ago. I don't think we had any issues with shipping, so everybody should have those now. With all that being said, I want to be respectful of Brent's time. He's gracious enough to come on and taste this barrel with us. So we don't want to delay too much. We're going to bring him on. After we go through the tasting, we will have our normal Barrels for Hope news for everybody. So stick around for that. We'll talk about the barrel picks coming up. And I think we have some other news. We have the allocated bottles for the auction at the end of the year for this month as well. But let's get Brent in here right now so we can go ahead and start tasting this thing. Welcome, Brent.
Well, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yep.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for taking out time of your day and joining us. I know our group is super excited. And for all of you in chat, if you guys have questions for Brent, you can go ahead and start posting those. We'll get to those. Also, we will, if you want, I will post the link to join the live stream. If you want to ask him your question in person, you can hop on and we'll do that. I'll post that a little bit later. Brent, while we start pouring this glass, do you want to talk about Four Roses? Talk about, your career getting involved with Four Roses?
Yeah, I'll just give a little background on myself for those of you that I haven't met before. And in particular, because I'm next week or the week after, it'll be 19 years that I will have been with the distillery. Actually, we were talking right before the show. One of the folks here is from Nashville, and I was living in Nashville when I was fortunate enough to come up and take a tour of Woodford Reserve, and that was the moment that I realized that they probably needed chemists in this industry, and that was my background, it's chemistry, and being from Kentucky, always having bourbon as kind of the backdrop, it's just embedded in the fabric of all things Kentucky. It was just the perfect, I was like all the ideas, the opportunity all came together at once. The only thing remaining was to find a job. And I was fortunate, this is 2005. I think the distilleries weren't getting as many resumes as they're probably getting today. And I took that tour on a Saturday. I got back on a Sunday to Nashville, and I applied for a job at a distillery that I really didn't know anything about, Four Roses. And within, I think, 5 days, I was up here interviewing, and it took me a few weeks to accept the job, but the rest is history. I got started at Four Roses when we had just come back to the United States as a straight bourbon whiskey. So we were really a thin crew at the time, which really meant I had a lot of opportunity to learn from some of the best people in the industry. And in doing that, I kind of grew with the company. And then fast forward to 2015, Jim Rutledge, who anyone that knows anything about bourbon knows Jim Rutledge or knows of him, he decided to retire after 49 years. And so September of 2015, I stepped into the role of master distiller. And now here I am getting to sample some delicious whiskey with all you guys.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Day night.
That's awesome. Well, I haven't even poured mine yet. Have you guys poured yours?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right. I better pour this sucker. So Well, I know we're gonna get into this, but it is such a good pick, such a good barrel. We're absolutely in love with it. So I can't wait to hear your notes.
Well, first I'll tell you, I guess you guys know what this barrel is, but I'll just recap in case anyone doesn't have the bottle in front of them. This is an 11-year, 1 month old OESF, 5th tier. That's probably important to a lot of you. And whether it is or isn't, it does mean that it's a high proof. This clocks in at 124.4 proof. And all of our barrels go in the barrel at 120. It depends on the elevation in the warehouse as to whether the proof's going to increase or decrease. The highest our warehouse go is 6 tiers. So this is almost the top. So of course this one has some elevated proof. But first thing I notice, and you can smell it, you can smell the proof, you can taste the proof, but it doesn't drink hot. To me, it's more robust and bright. And it definitely has a lot of body. And I think a lot of that is, again, because of the proof. First thing I notice on the nose, something that I sometimes don't get with really high proof bourbons, is I'm getting some of those nice, softer, creamy notes. And it's robust and bright, but there's that like fresh vanilla bean, a nice creamy note, and a lot of sweetness. I get like somewhere between brown sugar, caramel. Not overly surprising for a barrel of this age. Pretty typical for most of our bourbons in this age range. But what's really unique to me, apart from that fresh vanilla bean creaminess, is the hint of that, and it's almost a sweet mint, that mintiness. And that's pretty typical of the FE strain. Sometimes it's more in the spearmint or mint range. Sometimes it sort of bleeds over into clove. And I get some of that too. And then on the palate, it's even changed. It's been sitting in my glass just for 2 minutes and it's changed a little bit. That happens with these high proof bourbons. There's so much going on, so many flavors just in that compact high proof spirit that you let it breathe for a minute and it totally changes. It's even gotten softer. That was my main comment on this. For that high of proof, it's very soft, mouth coating flavors. And I see this a lot with the F. It's more than just a flavor. It's almost like a physical sensation on the tongue, like a cooling sensation. And I love that about the Fs. And I always say that if I'm doing some kind of blend, in particular, like a limited edition blend, I look at all the 10 recipes as like different tools. Each one kind of serves either a specific flavor profile. Sometimes it's the older barrels, they introduce more oak. But the Fs and the Vs to me are the ones that really contribute, apart from their unique flavors, a lot of mouthfeel and a very long finish. And this is a great example of that. That mouth coating, like I said, almost physical sensation, again, of that mint. And there's bright oak in there. And not too much oak. Like, as you all know, every barrel kind of has a curve where it improves with age to a point, then it starts to taper off. And then this happens to every barrel. It's just a matter of when. But at some point, that oak can start to overpower. Either just the straight oak flavor can be astringent or too dry, or just the overall oakiness kind of acts like a sort of envision like a wet blanket over the more delicate flavors that you want to experience. Some of those original flavors from the grains or from the yeast strain, from the fermentation. And with this one, it's still just the right amount of oak. It's bright. It lets you know that it's an aged bourbon. You're not going to mistake this for a 6 or 7-year-old bourbon any day of the week, but it's all harmonious and balanced. And again, I keep coming back to the word robust. It's almost an oxymoron to say it's robust and smooth, but this one does capture that. Like it has everything's at a high volume. It's like a mellow song at a high volume. I guess that's the best metaphor.
That's a great analogy, honestly.
That is a great analogy.
I'm going to use that again. Not for any bourbon, but I see that occasionally with some of these. And yeah, it's very nice. So very nice pick.
Well, it's interesting that you said right off the bat that you got creamy notes, because I think one of the things our pick team kind of accentuated during the pick was the texture and the velvety mouthfeel and how creamy it was for that proof. And that was interesting. That was one of the first things you said, because that's definitely what we picked up on it.
Yeah, that sticks out.
So mine has definitely gotten a little bit of air now, but like when I first poured it, I noticed there was like that kind of like confectionery sugar-y. I got a little bit of cherry on it on the nose. I mean, there's definitely some cherry influence to it for me. But
I'm getting that now.
Yeah, it's like confectionery sugar-y.
Yes, she's funny. I'm tasting cherry now as soon as you said that. I think that's true. I mean, a lot of any really good bourbon has so much complexity that it's interesting. Like even like in our lab when we're tasting, we try not to say anything because someone says something and it's like, oh yeah, okay, that's all I taste. But you're absolutely right.
In my notes, Dan, I actually had like the chocolate covered cherries, but without the chocolate. That vanilla cream mixed with cherry is what I get, like very powerful on this.
And Brent, kind of to your point, one of the things that so myself, Kim, and Lance, we were on this pick along with another one of our board members and one of our club members who is now actually a board member now. He's our treasurer. But when we were tasting through all the barrels, one of the things that I personally love to key in on, far above flavor notes, because you can say 10 different flavor notes, but I don't know if you like the barrel or not. What this has to me is it has that robust is what you said, but to me, it just has like this very dense, saturated flavor profile. And it's got those like bright, sweet notes, but then it's got that experience, that kind of special experience that sets it apart. And it did it on the pick. It set itself apart from all the other barrels we were tasting as kind of this very unique tasting experience. And, I haven't had all the Four Roses single barrels in the world, but I've had my fair few. And I don't run across this robust, saturated flavor that just kind of worms its way into your tongue and your cheeks and everything. And this one does that. And I absolutely love that.
Yeah, I love how you put that. And I'm coming up with all sorts of new material tonight. I'm going to actually have to borrow that because I think you put that very well. I think that really is what separates great barrels from exceptional barrels. It's that bourbon that really provides an experience. Yeah. And this one does. It almost tells a story in itself. It's so unique.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought this was definitely a bourbon aficionado's bourbon.
And that to me, that's what, having tried quite a few of the Four Roses limited edition small batches as well, like that's what those do so well. They bring that dense flavor profile that no matter what notes are standing out in any particular batch that you put together, it's got that special it factor that's just a little different from everything else you can get out there. And that experiential element that just, it's so hard to capture. It's almost like lightning in a bottle or lightning in a barrel, as it were. And it's just when you get it, like I know when we came into this pick, I had expectations for the barrel, my own expectations. I was one vote out of 5 people there or 6 people there. But I had expectations, and this barrel far exceeded those expectations for me.
For sure.
So Brent, I have a question for you. When you're determining the barrels that go into the single barrel program, like what we chose from versus maybe what you put in the gift shop versus what you earmark for like a core line product or maybe even something like a limited edition or something, is there anything you can tell us about your thought process behind where you determine which barrels go where within the Four Roses program?
I can walk you through the process and kind of what goes through my mind when I'm earmarking barrels for something in particular. So the first time that barrels even get evaluated for allocation or reservation for specific products is when they turn 3 years old. So every barrel So like this entire year, we've been pulling samples from batches that were distilled in 2021. And we typically do it about 4 times a year. So in February or March, we pulled samples of everything that was distilled in the first quarter of 2021. And we do that every quarter, compile all the samples. And then in January, we'll set those up, like all the OBSVs in a day, all the OESFs in a day. And so OESFs, for example, might as well use that since that's what we're drinking. So I will look at all the OESFs, all the batches side by side, and in one day decide which batches are going to go for small batch select, which are going to be in Four Roses bourbon, which are going to be earmarked for private barrel, or which are going to be earmarked for limited edition. And I know exactly what the forecast is and what the inventory is. So I know exactly how much we have to allocate of each one of those for each one of those different products. But now that's just sort of a preliminary allocation, because that's at 3 years. Once these barrels become 6, 7, 8 years, a lot of them can surprise us in good ways, bad ways, or just surprise us in ways we don't even expect. And at that point, when I'm pulling samples, in particular for the F, it's a big component in small batch select. So it might be when it's time to refresh the small batch select formula, or pulling all the samples of those small batch select batches that were allocated. And about that time, I'll be looking at the batches that were allocated also for private barrel and for limited edition. And at that time, it might be that some of the batches that were allocated for private selection, there are instances where it's like, well, this really didn't develop as much F as I thought it was going to. Let's move this out. And there are cases where particular batches are just so incredible in that they really represent what like an OESF should smell and taste like. So I might take 2, 3, 4, 5 tiers from that and split that aside and put that into private barrel, and maybe move some of the original allocated barrels from private barrel out if I think these other ones are more appealing to the consumer, or put some in limited edition. So that's just the example of OESF. The other products are used in many more, like OBSV is single barrel. It's in Four Roses bourbon. It's in small batch select. So you get a lot more OBS, and it's in in one of the Japanese products. So OBSV gets a lot more, there's a lot more moving of batches around. But we are always looking at batches, evaluating batches to do test blends, to refresh the formulas, to release into the bottling of our standard products. And short answer is through those evaluations, anytime there's a batch that stands out, either because it's really a great representation of what that recipe should be, or in some cases it's unique. It's just for whatever reason, it stands out. It's like a honey batch. Then those will also get earmarked for private barrel or for limited edition. And so once it's in that bucket, once it's approved and it's earmarked for private selection, when Mandy needs that particular recipe, once the last batch or last 2 batches have been depleted, she will pull samples of that batch I've allocated, send them to me, and she'll be like, hey, I need tasting notes, and I need these tiers approved by Tuesday. We're always kind of flying by the seat of our pants. And so at that point, I'll go through and I might look at, say there are 3 tiers of OESF that are revolving into the program, like 66 barrels. I'll go through and look at all of those. And at that point, I've tasted them at full strength. I've smelled them at full strength, smelled them at 20%, tasted them at 20%. I know that batch is good. And so for efficiency and just so I can actually get it done, at that point, and this is true of any single barrels because we go through a lot of single barrel, at that point, they're all just diluted to 20%. And we go through and just smell and make sure that there aren't any outliers in a bad way, like any that are. Now, there's a lot more leeway in the private barrel program because we want there to be a lot of variety for consumers because they're picking it. When it's like a standard single barrel, the specification's a little bit tighter because it's the ball's in our court to approve a barrel that's on the shelf. When someone's buying a single barrel, they expect some variety from barrel to barrel. They don't want something that's a total outlier that tastes totally different from what they would expect. In the private barrel program, that's kind of fun. Some of those get through.
Yeah.
We work those through. But while I'm doing that, it's really tough. Like the ones that are picked by me for the VC, I frankly don't have time to sit there and do barrel picks in the lab, specifically for those. So what I'm doing is when I'm going through and earmarking or approving barrels to be released into the program, like that final step, I'll typically pick like 3 or 4 from each tier, and I'll check it and send that to Mandy. And even when I check a barrel, that doesn't even mean it's necessarily going to go into the gift shop. What happens is when that batch is up and they're bottling from that batch, if the visitor center needs, let's go back to OESF, if they need an OESF and the next batch that where they're pulling from is the OESF, that tier where I have some barrels approved, they might use 2 or 3 of those for the visitor center. If she needs those in the program, she might roll those out for consumers, even though I've earmarked them. And when I'm earmarking those, that's pretty tough. Like, it's kind of, I try not to really have a system for it. Like, I don't go in and think I'm going to pick the best 3 barrels out of here and keep them for the visitor center. But at the same time, sometimes I approach like, I want to get a couple that are right there in the middle, like what you'd expect. Might occasionally throw one in where I think, oh, this one's really special. But I'm not going in just like hand pick the very best just for the visitor center. I'm trying to give the visitor center a nice, good representation of what each one of those recipes or what barrels from that batch should be. So that's kind of my approach to that.
Yep. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Honestly, I had assumed that you kind of zeroed in on what you thought was the most representative of that type of recipe for the visitor center versus having a little bit more uniqueness in the single barrel program. So it's cool to hear that kind of is part. Very surprising to hear that you start doing that selection process as early as 3 years. That's pretty cool.
That is cool.
Yeah, if I had anybody, I'd start more at like 6, but we have to have everything allocated so we can give accurate forecasting and plans for sales. That's why I look at it again. Everything again, typically it's starting at 6, 7 years.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And watering it down to 20% for anybody in chat that may not know, that's watching, like that's where you can really start detecting some of if there's something that's flawed specifically in a barrel or off notes or anything crazy. That's the purpose of that, correct?
Exactly.
So I got a question, Brent. So being now that 19 years in, what would you say, what project, and being on numerous projects, what project would you say was the most challenging, and then which was the most memorable?
Oh, okay. Good question. Probably the most challenging was when in 2016 or at the end of 2015, marketing came to me and they said, we want to do something. They were trying to say it in a nice way. They're basically saying, we lost Jim Rutledge, who everybody knows, and now we've got you and nobody knows who you are. So we want to put something out to show everyone that, we're behind you. We've got a great master distiller. So I was like, it's like, we're not commemorating anything, right? We're just introducing. Like, we're just going to introduce you because I haven't done anything. And so there was a lot of pressure there because I was going to be the first anything with my name on it. And it actually had my head on the side of it. So a lot of pressure there. It was Elliot Select.
Yeah.
Is what ultimately became. And so, and I tell this story a lot because this really was kind of to me, a pivotal point in how I approach my job. Because they came to me, they said, how do you want to do this? Do you want to do a small batch, a single barrel? And I said, well, I think it makes sense if we're going to do a spring release. Let's do a single barrel. Even though looking back, I probably should have argued and done a small batch because I really love blending. But at the time, I was like, let's do a single barrel just because of the timing. And even at the time, because I'd already started pulling samples to work with Jim on his 50th anniversary limited edition, but he retired before he got to 50, and he didn't tell anyone until right before he retired. So we were gearing up. I had the samples pulled. I was about to start on test blends with him, and he's like, "I'm retiring." So it's like, I've got all these samples here. I've already started evaluating them, and there are 2 batches that are fantastic. So let's just do that. Let's do a single barrel. And then the more I looked at those, it was getting into my head. Like I was probably losing sleep. It was over something silly. It was 2 fantastic batches. One was 14 years old. The other one was 16 years old. One was an OESK, and that's the 14-year-old that I ultimately went with. The 16-year-old, something about it told me that consumers would like it more. And so it was more of like a struggle about that. Like, what is my purpose here? Am I trying to, I like this more, but I'm sure that other people are going to like this one more. And I was driving myself crazy. So I was like, I'm going to be dealing with this every year. Anytime I develop something new, unless I figure out an easy way to approach this. And that's when I came to the conclusion. I was like, okay, here's the only, I can't second guess what other people are thinking ever, because that'll drive me nuts. Yep. So I'm going to decide what I'm going to do from now on is I'm going to blend things or put out products that I love and hope everyone else loves what I love.
I love that.
That was the approach I took then. And I'm always trying to create, like with the small batch limited editions, always trying to create things that are different each year. But ultimately, I want something that I love, that I want to drink. And so far, I guess my palate aligns with most everyone's out there, because it seems like most of the time everyone is in alignment with what I like.
Yep.
Fortunately.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. I was very curious about that one.
Yeah, that's
I imagine, Brent, you could be a lot more consistent that way if you're just tasting to your palate than adapting things to what you think everyone would like. And then if they trust your palate, you're going to be consistent throughout your career.
Exactly. So I'm glad I chose that path, and I haven't lost any sleep over it since. Now it's pretty simple. I just try to make something that I like.
I'd say it's worked out.
Yeah.
I hope so.
We do have a member that's brave enough to come on, so I'm going to bring Brad on. He's got a question for you. What's up, Brad? Welcome, buddy.
How you doing, brother?
Brad?
Doing great, man.
See you, Brad.
Yeah, guys too, and gals. Hey, Brad, how are you?
Doing well, thanks. How are you, Brad?
No complaints. There's probably 10 questions I'd love to ask, but off the top of my head, from one chemistry geek to another, how do you feel like your chemistry background makes you a better master distiller?
That's an excellent question. Strangely enough, some days it doesn't even, actually most days, it doesn't even play into what I do at all. A lot of what I do now is dealing just with the flavor, what I'm experiencing with my senses. But the chemistry is what got my foot in the door. Analytical chemistry in particular. They hired me to run a GC mass spec.
Yep.
But there are times like when we're talking about like analytical methods to like maintain consistency through fermentation, or to track maybe why this batch was a little different than this other batch. It does come in handy there to like understand what's happening through fermentation with either, higher alcohol development or ester development, or the acids, and then the subsequent esterification of those acids, those kinds of things. It's good to have a rough understanding at least, so that you can sort of make that correlation between, this aroma in the bourbon could mean that this happened in fermentation, or, we could maybe change it by adjusting this parameter in fermentation. And even though that sounds really scientific, there's so many variables that go into fermentation that most of the time, regardless of how much experience you have or how much chemistry background you have, it's in most cases like, well, let's try it and see, or that could be, or that probably is it. So, but most days I don't talk fusel oils, and I'm not talking about the different higher alcohols or any of the reactions that take place. Probably the most I use some of that, kind of scientific talk now is when I get a question about it.
Cool. Awesome, man. Well, that's great. I was very curious about that. Also, one other, since I'm on here quickly, how would you say that you were? I mean, I'll be honest. I think you've done a great job since Jim retired. I'll be honest. I've been a Four Roses fan for some time, and I was concerned when he retired. But you've done a great job of just. I mean, I couldn't be more happy with what you've done. I would like to ask you, how do you feel like you're alike? You and Jim are alike, and what do you think that? And how are you different, maybe, as far as the way you look at the process of master distiller?
That's a good question. And I say it sort of ties into, I get the question sometimes, like, what the most important thing is that I learned from him. And because it's so hard to get specific when you're talking about the job, and this is true, I think probably the biggest thing I learned from was outside, the day-to-day, what you do at work. It's probably about appreciating what you do and understanding and appreciating the consumers. I remember, and it's kind of, I love talking about it. I love talking to anyone that wants to hear about bourbon. I never forget that, it's something that I can easily take for granted. Something I do every day that, to me, I can't just say it's just a job, because even though it's a job, it is more of it than just a job to me. But I have to keep perspective that people from the outside, looking in, that are curious and want to learn more about bourbon, all I have to do is take a few minutes and answer questions. And that's information that I might take for granted that is really special or really something insightful to someone from the outside. So I realized that I saw how he treated the consumers and how he would take the time to answer questions for anyone and everyone. And just by seeing him doing that, time and time again, I realized, and I could see the impact that made. That's really something I've always appreciated about how he handled his role and the responsibility as master distiller. And I think that's something that I really try to live up to. Nice. But again, fortunately, I think it's kind of easy because I love talking about it. Cool. And that's maybe the second part. Like, I think he's more of a, I don't know how he feels about public speaking, but he makes it look easy. He seems like I know when they first told me I was going to be master distiller, and they didn't ask, I guess they just assumed my answer was yes. they told me, they said, one, Jim's retiring, and I was like, wow, that's big news. I can understand why you called me into your office. This is the CEO. And it's like, and the second part is you're going to be the next master distiller. And I remember thinking, like, it wasn't, oh, I've got big shoes to fill, or I'll screw this up. Frankly, I wasn't worried about any of that. And a lot of that stuff I could handle it all on my own. But there are a lot of people at the distillery with tons of knowledge and experience, so I wasn't worried about any of that. There are plenty of people there that know their jobs and can keep everything going. And yeah, I could probably, if I knew nothing and made some bad decisions, a couple of years, it probably would have all kind of become unraveled. But it would take a while to unravel, because it's such a good group of people we have working there. The first thing that went through my mind was, well, I guess they don't know that I can't speak in public. I was like, well, it'll be a good run. I'll be master distiller for 6 months. Then they'll see that I clam up. I can't talk in public. I freak out, talk in circles. Because really, up to that point, my only experience with talking in public was like, winging book reports in school, or trying to BS my way through public speaking, which I took in college. And those experiences were not good at all. But it turns out, like, I guess I know the material and I like talking about it, and it really doesn't. For a while, I'd kind of get nervous, so it doesn't bother me at all now.
Yeah. Well, That's cool, man. Thank you very much for answering those questions.
Well, thanks for coming on, Brad.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thanks for coming on, Brad. Appreciate you, brother.
Cheers, Brad.
Cheers, buddy.
I've been friends with Brad for about 5 years now, so I can say this confidently. He's much smarter than he looks.
I
I waited to say that till he was off the air. But Brad, we were at a pick at Hard Truth. He helped us pick a single barrel at Hard Truth. What was that? Our second pick. And I remember I didn't really know what Brad did for a living. And Brian Smith, the master distiller at Hard Truth, was telling us some early problems they had with their water. And Brad in the back all of a sudden says, "Oh, it sounds like you had a problem with," and he rattled off something that sounded like a license plate to me. And Brian Smith goes, "That's exactly what was wrong." So yeah, Brad knows his stuff. He's a pretty smart guy.
There's a lot of other good questions in here in the chat.
Yeah, I think Terry had one for you. Brent, do you have a favorite recipe, or which do you reach for the most? That's a good question.
I really don't have one recipe that I could just say that's my favorite. If you said like between ages 12 and 14 or between ages 7 and 8, I have some that I reach for more often in those age ranges. But there are times, like if I do a barrel pick, and I don't do a lot of them, but if you tallied up like the ones that I pick more often, it would probably be like OESV, OESK. But at one time or another, I've picked all the 10 recipes.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say, you could look at some of the limited editions. There's always a mid-teen OESK or OESV in there.
Yeah.
And that's just a good, elegant representation of Four Roses.
Yeah. One of the questions or debates we get all the time is, what percentage goes to the flavor? Is it the recipe? Is it the tier? Is it the age? That may be an impossible question to answer, but I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, it's impossible to answer, but I can tell you, I think the older it gets, the more the barrel influences the flavors. Yeah. Like if you look at, like at 5 years, an OESF and an OBSV are remarkably different. If you do a barrel pick and you're looking at 2 11-year-old barrels, there's still going to be some differences, but so much of that character at that age is dictated by the barrel. It's so intrinsically linked to those caramels, the vanillas, or the oaks. And there's a lot of synergy there between the original flavors and the barrel flavors that just that oak influence becomes so much greater that at that age, the recipes still make a difference, but not as much as they do at younger ages, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Sure.
That makes perfect sense. And it's honestly, when I go for Four Roses picks, the first thing I want to know when I see one anywhere is how old is it?
Yeah.
That's the very first thing I look for. And then the second thing I look for is not necessarily the tier, but the proof, which is usually I'm looking at the tier for that. But yeah, if I can get 4 and up with like double-digit years, I tend to gravitate towards those. And it was interesting in the pick. I think our top 3 or 4 front runners were some of the oldest barrels in the pick.
I think it's interesting. So we always talk about the 10 recipes, and that gives us the variety. And the single story warehouses, we try to minimize that age difference or that proof and the aging differences, from the different temperatures. And that really holds true up till like 6-7 years. So in that age range, we're really looking at one dimension, and that's recipes.
Yeah.
Of course, batch to batch variation, but simplify it, we're looking at that one dimension. But you go out to like this age, 11, 12, 13 years, I think you're looking at 3 dimensions because you're looking at the age, the recipe, and the tier matters then. Like I can promise you the first tier barrel from the same batch is going to be much different than this one.
Yeah.
And personally, again, there's always an exception, and I don't like to speak in absolutes, but in general, for barrels about this age, I kind of gravitate to like the second or third tier barrels, like 108 to like 112 proof typically. That's usually the sweet spot. But there are plenty of batches that I'll taste through all 6 and be like, nah, 6th tier all the way.
Yeah.
Or first tier for whatever reason, the way it all comes together. So on average, though, I kind of like those right in that range. And it's usually for the reasons that this exhibits. It's that creaminess, that soft, like that mouthfeel that's just like mouth coating. And if you can get that at a high tier, it's kind of like a win-win situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, in the top 3 or 4 we were deciding between, there was an OESV and an OESK, which are the 2 recipes I gravitate towards myself. And to have an OESF beat those out. And in large part, I mean, we're a bunch of whiskey nerds and we like a big profile, and the finish on this thing is just amazing. And that kind of maybe sledgehammered a little bit of the nuance of some of those other barrels, but there were some really good barrels in that pick.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, I've on every pick I've been on, I've actually picked OESKs except for this one. And the OESK in our group was a really low tier. And I think the only thing we loved how it tasted, but I don't think the finish held up to the finish on this, if I remember correctly. Which was really interesting.
To Brent's point, when you can get a high tier that drinks like this, then you're gonna.
Yeah.
Speaking of how the barrel influence, Terry asked, what barrel char do you guys use, or do you use different levels of char on different barrels? That's a great question. If you're at liberty to say.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we're 4 across the board.
Okay.
EJ asked a really good question. He says, are there any plans for a Four Roses rye?
Currently, no, but there's always a possibility. I'm interested in putting out a rye, and we had some discussion. You may have heard we're adding to our current 10 recipes.
Yep.
So that was part of the discussion when we were looking at something else to do, because we actually have some extra capacity now since our expansion to start trying different things. And I like rye whiskeys a lot. I like a lot of different whiskeys. Honestly, I'd like to try a lot of different things, but we decided that what we do best is what we're known for is the blending, which is, again, my favorite part of the job. And so what we're doing is basically taking the palette that I'm currently working with and just expanding it. So we're going higher on the rye for all 5 recipes, up to 43% rye. Currently 35% is where we are. In the low end, we're going from 20% rye down to 10%. So we'll have, again, just that broader range of recipes to work with. Still don't know what they're going to be used for. And certainly probably some private selections and single barrels, and a lot will be held on to for limited editions. But as far as like what kind of small batch or other releases we'll do with those, it's too early to tell.
Yeah.
I might get an idea in about 3 years. It's really making me appreciate some of the challenges that startup distilleries have to deal with.
Yeah.
Sure.
You don't know. You start making something like, okay, so this is going to be good, right? Yeah, it's going to be good. Okay, let's continue making this exact recipe and put all of our eggs in that basket and hope that in 5 years, 6 years, this is exactly what we should have been making the whole time.
Yeah, that's impossible to even imagine.
Yeah, I know. I had considered it, but I'm really kind of putting a lot of thought into it now and appreciating what, kind of thought process goes into that. Or the alternative is, well, okay, let's try 50 different things over the course of the next 5 years, and then we'll know, exactly which one was best. Then we got to wait another 5 years until zero in on that, and then wait another 5 years. So it's just the nature of the industry. It's It's kind of what makes it cool, and it's kind of what makes you want to pull your hair out at sometimes.
Yeah. To that point, Bourbon Engineer asks, how many barrels typically go in a select blend?
Like a limited edition is on average about 200 barrels. And And those, after I did the test blends, I actually look at that's treated like a single barrel. I look at every individual barrel that goes into that. If it's a small batch select, that's typically 200 to 300 barrels. So that's a little bit bigger than a small batch limited edition run.
Yeah. I do have a quick question. So when you get some of those ultra kind of high age ones, like the the 16, 17 year stuff, as far as like cycling them through the warehouse, obviously at some point you have to pull them down to a tier 1 or tier 2. Are they cycled back up at any point, or do they remain down in that tier 1, tier 2 level until it's time to pull them?
Actually, the only time we move a barrel is to pull it out of the warehouse.
Really?
Oh, wow.
There might be times where we'll move barrels, like if there are a couple special barrels midway through the tier that need to be pulled out. They might move some of the tier below just to get to those, and then the next day maybe move those back. But no, So if it says 5th tier, this was sitting on the 5th tier all 11 years and 1 month of its aging.
Wow. I know what was it? Was it the Father's Day release?
Oh man, that was an amazing bottle.
Yeah.
Yeah. So well, so that remained in the same spot its entire aging. Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Regardless of what the labels may have said.
Yeah.
You probably heard that debacle. They were.
we did hear about that.
Wow.
Mike Ackley asked, does the barrel location north, south, east, or west play a role at all?
It shouldn't. By design, our warehouse should all age the same. And frankly, in theory, they should all be the same. But the warehouses, if it's facing a different direction, the sun hits it differently and different times of the day, different times of the year. So there are definitely minor differences from warehouse to warehouse. Whether those really play a significant role in how they age or not, I guess, yeah, the answer is yes. There are differences. Are they so minute that no instrumentation or human palate could tell? or if I paid attention to them, would I be able to tell? Or can you guys tell? I don't know the answer to that. I tend to think it's probably minimal. I think you do see a lot of differences. Like in the private barrels, you might have a run where you have people be like, oh man, this M East run or batches from M East have been really great lately or consistently good. And I don't argue with them. And maybe there is something magical about that location of that warehouse or another. But I think a lot of that can be explained by the fact that when we're running, say, this in September while we're running, we're going to put everything away and to try to keep everything in one warehouse in September. Then in October, we'll go to another warehouse. So that's sort of how we try to keep the inventory spread out so that we don't, all of 1 year's production isn't in one warehouse or all one recipe isn't one warehouse. So, something ever happened to a warehouse, that would only be like 1 month out of every 24 months inventory was wiped out. So there'd still be some continuity there.
Yeah.
But there's certain batches that for whatever reason, the weather, all these millions of variables that go into it, some of which we understand, some we don't. We might just have 5 batches in a row. It's like, wow, this distillate quality is amazing. And they all happen to be in the same warehouse. So a lot of what comes out of that warehouse in 6, 7, 10, 12 years will be representative from those 5 batches that were just a really good run. So that could be part of it. I don't know. Again, and the other part is like, people look at me like I should be the expert in comparing warehouses. But frankly, when I'm looking at, when I'm doing blends or picking barrels, that's the last thing I look at. I never pay attention to what warehouse anything is in.
Yeah.
I look at, and I'll look at the recipe, the age, and I'm like the batch IDs. Like I know I can look at a batch ID, like, oh yeah, I remember this one from last year. This one's great. I hope it's improved as much as I thought. There's certain batches that I'm really familiar with, but I can be out in the market and someone be like, man, how about that VE run? I'm like, I don't know. I'm remembering what recipe and when was it? Was it the program in there now, or was it in there last year? And I'm like, oh yeah, that batch. Okay, I know.
Well, I got one final question for you, Brent, and this is a good one. So let's say you're on a Four Roses pick, just like Four Roses constructs their picks, and you've got all 10 recipes in front of you.
Okay.
How many of those are you identifying on that pick?
So I actually test myself when I do these.
Love it.
I can give you a pretty good answer. And let me preface it just to defend myself a little bit before I give you the answer. It is really hard for me at barrel strength, and even at barrel strength. Like when I'm doing these, if I'm doing this in the lab, I will take like 5-10 minutes between samples. My palate is not made for. Okay, enough excuses. And because at that age, the barrel has more influence on the recipes, But I'm usually pretty good at calling out the Fs. Those stand out. I usually pick out the Fs. Between B and E, sometimes I'm almost flipping a coin. Occasionally it'll be like, that's definitely a B mash bill on the F. The O's, if I'm lucky, those will stand out sometimes. Q's and O's, sometimes those get a little bit tricky. And there are times where I might taste a K and be like, that's a great Q.
So what are we at? 25%?
If I'm a good day, lucky, I'm probably between, out of 10 of them, I might get the yeast strain on 4 or 5. Mash bill on a couple, but there have been times where, and I've done better than that, but there have been times where it's like, oh, I got two yeast strains right. Yeah. So people ask me all the time. I was like, please don't challenge me to that. And I'm not don't put any money on me.
I think that's the beauty of your guys' barrel selection process. And I did one a few years back with a group, and I remember Mandy was there, and I remember saying OESV was my favorite and all this. And, but the process in which you pick it, there is no bias towards anything. It is literally a blind. You have all those recipes there in front of you, and you're literally picking the best one as a group. And I love the process you guys have there for single barrel selection. Absolutely love it.
Yeah. That was Mandy's idea.
I love that.
Everyone that came in, they were saying I just don't want to look at any cues. I don't want to. Yep. And so she's like, okay, let's give everyone a dose of humility here.
Yep.
We're going to cover up the sides of these barrels. And she can tell you tons of stories of people that come in there. I'm going to pick anything but a Q or what. And then, of course, they pick a Q.
Yeah.
So
you
love to see it.
It's great. And I love it. And so
I love the process, though. That single barrel selection process is great. So
it is incredible.
Yes, it is.
Well, Brent, you're getting lots of love in the chat. We really appreciate you. We want to respect your time, but thanks for all you've done. The barrel we picked, like I said in the intro, helped raise $4,500 for charity. So we couldn't be more thankful to you guys. Thanks for letting us pick a barrel. Our members are just absolutely love it. So we appreciate everything you guys do.
Well, thanks for all you do too. That's great news. All the money you guys have raised, and congratulations.
All right. Well,
cheers to that.
Yeah. Cheers. Cheers, Brent. Thanks for everything, man.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you.
Brent, have a great evening.
You all too. Thank you.
Cheers.
All right, guys. Man, that was awesome. I'm so excited he came on. We've got a lot of news to get to for you guys. So thanks for everybody that tuned in. And Kim, thanks for setting that up. It was absolutely amazing to taste a barrel with the master distiller and get his notes and his opinions. That was just awesome, man. That was a dream come true for a bourbon nerd.
No, we would have kept him here. Yeah. It was gracious of him to give us our time, and we would have had him here all night asking questions if we could have. I had about 10 more I could have asked him right off the top of my head.
I know. That was awesome, man.
Super cool.
That was awesome. All right, Josh, what we got going on for Barrels for Hope news?
Oh man, let me get my head on straight, because all day long I've just been doing my day-to-day business in my head thinking like I get to drink our barrel pick with Brent Elliot later. Like, let me get my head on straight here. Lance, while I do that, do you want to call out the allocated bottles to be donated to the next year's charity auction?
Yeah. So like every month, guys, thanks. Huge shout out to A1 Liquors and to Narav for donating these barrels, because 100% of what we raise in the auction goes back to charity at the end of the year. So this month he donated Heaven Hill Grain to Glass Rye, which I've heard is great. I haven't tried it, but I've heard that bottle's awesome. Elijah Craig Toasted Rye, and a Blanton's bottle. So
nice. All right. So we do have some really important news to cover. So first and foremost is we are working behind the scenes on a exodus from Patreon, specifically because of the organizational talent that we have as part of the board. We don't really need the Patreon platform to handle what it does for us. And there's a lot of fees associated with Patreon that we can cut into about a third and free up thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars annually for charity purposes. So if we can kind of come off of Patreon and go to more of like a newsletter, like an email communication based format with you guys, and Discord, please, 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 if you are not on Discord, join Discord. If I can figure it out, believe it or not, I'm a Luddite. I hate technology. I love and hate technology. If I can figure Discord out, you can figure it out. And if you need me to hold your hand, just let me know and we'll get it worked out for you. But, Discord's where we have our community element. And then anytime we have any news we need to relay to you guys, or things we typically post on Patreon right now, those will be delivered via a newsletter, which we'll just automatically sign you guys up for. We're going to be building a spreadsheet with all the members and tiers and all that stuff. And you'll get to watch your email. You'll be billed, instead of being billed through Patreon, you'll be billed through a QuickBooks subscription. And if anybody needs to change or cancel their subscription, you can just email us and we can get that taken care of for you. Brian, our new treasurer, will be handling all that. But this is literally going to free up essentially the magnitude of almost an entire cost of another barrel every year that we get to donate to charity. So pretty big deal for making sure that we can keep you guys members price the same and have more money for charity. So it's a win-win. And when we get ready to make this change, it will probably be September is kind of the lay the groundwork for this, building the spreadsheets, making sure we have a database of membership, contact information and all that stuff. And then in October, we're going to be making the push, because the sooner we leave Patreon, the sooner we get to start saving more money for charity. So huge benefits to this. Please be on the lookout for communication through Patreon and newsletter when we start emailing you guys about this stuff. Make sure when we start sending out I'm not the treasurer, so I have no clue how the QuickBooks subscription things are going to go out. Brian can speak to that maybe on next month's live stream, but that stuff will be coming you guys' way. Make sure you get signed up. And, if you need some hand holding, that's what we're here for. I know I would be like, what do I do? Wait, send me the link. Tell me what I need to do. So we're going to try to make it as easy as possible. So be on the lookout.
Basically what Josh is saying is join Discord so we don't have to raise your rates.
Yeah. Well, and even look, if you're completely against it, that's fine. You're going to miss out on some of the chat, some of the community stuff, but a lot of the things that get posted on Patreon, polls and things like that, a lot of that stuff is going to be, we'll put a poll together on Google Forms and we'll email it to you guys and you'll respond there. And then, a lot of more everyday communication will happen on Discord. So yeah, definitely check those things out. Lance, I'm going to kick it back over to you for some, Bourbon Engineer says, so we save $13K plus in fees that we can donate. It won't be quite $13K because QuickBooks charges their small percentage, but I think it's like under 3% for QuickBooks process. It's like a credit card processing fee essentially versus what we pay to Patreon right now, which is.
But plus we have the everyone knows how the economy is. Prices are going up on everything. Prices are going up
Yep.
on barrels. So we don't want to increase people's fees. So yes, it is, whatever, 10 to 12K less. That is definitely going to translate to more money we can donate to charity, but it's not a black and white answer as far as, we're saving 12K so we can donate 12K, but we do need to get away from it to save money, because it's just ridiculous to give Patreon that much money every month.
Yeah, and to be totally transparent with you guys, we really try to do that through the history of this organization. We were looking at the numbers behind the scenes for what barrel picks cost, the direction everything's going, and it's like, man, can we keep doing this and keep our fee at $65 for our full members every month? And that kind of made us think about some outside the box solutions other than just staying stuck on Patreon. And once we ran the numbers, it really started to make a lot of sense.
Yep. So yeah, and Terry, that's a good point. I mean, we know the issues people have with Patreon, which is very frustrating. So we hope to do away with that.
And it will totally eliminate that. So that's a huge benefit as well. Brian did ask, when will year one financials be available for members to look at? Are the board meeting minutes being posted anywhere? So yes, we do have a shared folder that's it should be on Discord, and I don't know, it likely needs to be updated. But we do have
I thought that was posted, but
members documents on Discord. There's a Google Drive folder that's where we upload our meeting minutes. I'm looking right now. It's got it. We do need to update it, but it does have meeting minutes, our bylaws, all that stuff. And then as far as financials go, Reggie and Brian are working on that right now as we transition Reggie out of the treasurer role and Brian into the treasurer role. I think Reggie's got something to post, or I have to look back in the meeting minutes, but we did talk about sharing the financials as far as what we donated and what we raised, but we did donate obviously the $40,000 checks. But as far as like everything else, we'll get with Reggie and Brian on that, and we'll make sure we update the Discord, because I'm looking at it right now, or the shared folder on Google Drive. I'm looking at it now, and it does need to be updated. All right. Speaking of news, I'm going to pitch it over to Lance. We've got some Knob Creek news.
All right. Sit down for this news, guys, because you won't believe it, but we picked another short barrel. I've never heard of a Knob Creek short barrel, nor has Narav. I don't think, nor has anyone on the board ever heard of a Knob Creek short barrel. We got news a couple weeks ago that we're going to have about 45 barrels to put in a randomizer for you, or I'm sorry, 45 bottles to put in a randomizer for you guys. We say this all the time, but nothing is guaranteed in the bourbon barrel picking game, and you have to be fluid and you have to be able to adjust on the spot. The great news is, Knob Creek contacted us before they sent it and said, hey, we've never really seen this, but you guys picked a short barrel and there's not many bottles. Would you like another kit? So I talked to A1, we talked to the board. We all voted that, we don't want to lose those 45 bottles, because it is a fantastic barrel. But so that we're going to get those 45 barrels, we will put them in a randomizer for you guys. We'll post a poll. I'm sure that'll sell out. And they are sending us another kit to do another pick. So really it's a win-win situation. In my opinion, we get 45 bottles from a short barrel and we get another Knob Creek barrel. And I can't even imagine that we would pick another short barrel, but apparently we're good at that.
I literally didn't think they existed at Knob Creek. I've never heard of one yielding any, like they yield like 150, 60, 70 bottles. Like we should be well covered, but sometimes things happen. Leave it to us to find the outlier in the bunch. But yeah, I mean, to Lance's point, we're getting another pick, which is fantastic news. And then these additional bottles, not only are they bottles that we get to offer to you guys, so that's just a nice bonus, but also the money generated from these bottles is more money for charity. So
Yep.
There we go. It's a win-win.
Yep. So if you don't get picked in the randomizer, don't worry. We're going to pick another one, and hopefully we'll be able to bring one of you guys on to help with that pick. I volunteered to sit out on the next one so somebody else could help pick. But we'll get it all situated once those samples get here, and we'll get moving on that. The Elijah Craig barrel proof barrel, I don't know when that will be in, but that should be in any day. And as soon as it's in, we'll get those out to you. I have not heard about the yield or anything, so I don't even know that that's to the distributor yet. I don't think Narav's heard anything, so we're waiting on that.
Yeah, based on when we picked last year's, I mean, granted, things change all the time, but based on when we picked last year's, we picked in March, and I think it was ready in July. So I think, we're getting right there around that time frame where we should start to hear something about that. Hopefully any day now. Yeah,
I'll add, I saw Terry say putting a barrel on a scale should really tell roughly how many bottles are in it. I'm surprised distillers don't use scales more. I think that is true for a small non-distilling producer like Foregate, and we know how that turned out. But when you're talking about, Jim Beam that does millions and millions of barrels, they're not going to be pulling those when they have so many averages of, they probably had no idea or no reason to suspect that it was going to be that short based on where it was in the warehouse.
And we are in a unique position. Most groups don't necessarily need to hit a certain number of barrels, or a certain number of bottles out of a barrel. So that is a unique challenge that we do present to people when we do a pick. And when we fall short, we're gonna scrap and claw. We're gonna get you guys another pick, and we get more bottles for charity, and get more bonus picks out there. So we just got to be ready to pivot as always.
Yeah. And I thought it was really awesome that they called Narav first and said, hey, do you still want this? We understand it's small. If you don't want it, we'll get you more. And then we said, well, what if we take that and get another barrel? And they were like, yep, no problem. So I think that was all awesome. I think it's going to turn out great. I've never had a bad Knob Creek pick. So
Earl's got a great question. He says, any news on the Starlight pick with Silbox? We don't have any news yet that I know about. Kim?
We don't. I reached out to Sealbox and to Starlight, and I am waiting on an answer.
Good
so
deal.
I just reached out to them again last week.
I cannot wait for those. Those are so good, you guys.
So good.
You're gonna want them. Everybody that was at the annual event can attest to how good those two barrels are.
Yep.
Speaking of barrel picks, we're working on finalizing the last ones through the year. We've already got Green River scheduled at the end of this month, as well as Nashville Barrel Company at the end of this month as well. Green River, their whiskey's fantastic. If you guys, I'm sure most of you guys have had it, you know how good it is, and those foolproof picks can be unbelievably good. And the value's off the charts on them as well. And they usually yield pretty well. So people who want a second bottle, there should be opportunities for those, but I don't want to say that for sure yet, because leave it to us to pick one that is right at the limit or something. But Nashville Barrel Company, we've already contacted all the attendees for Green River and Nashville Barrel Company. And if you guys are going to be at Nashville Barrel Company, we're going to have a great time. It is going to be a good barrel pick and a very good hang. So looking forward to that.
Heck yeah.
Hey, one other bottle item that we did not talk about. The Mash and Journey Whiskey Club picked 2 Still Austin bottles a few months ago. Mark and I joined them on that pick. One of them yielded 170, 80 something. One yielded just over 200. $5 from every bottle sold is coming to Barrels for Hope.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
Yeah.
Incredibly generous of them.
Did they sell out of those yet, Kim?
I know they sold out of one, and they were pretty close on the other. I don't know if it's completely gone or not.
Jason posted the link in Discord if you guys want to buy a bottle of that. Kim was on both picks. They're amazing. So
they're amazing.
Yeah.
The Ludicrous Bourbon, which is the Butterscotch Bomb, I think sold out pretty quickly. The Liquid Schwartz had some bottles left the last time I looked.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome of Jason to do that for us.
So
Brian
asked
Rathke wanted to know why the distribution of the Starlight picks different than the other picks. You want to take that, Josh?
Well, actually, Kim, do you want to take it, or I'm happy to take it?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So it was part of setting up for the annual event. So the Starlight picks were for the annual event, and we're already, A1 Liquors does a lot for us already. And so being able to run the distribution through Sealbox where you guys can just order them, because they're not one of the included 6 picks. Those are 2 bonus barrels that we got from Starlight. And so having those go through an online distribution channel where you guys can just order them and receive them makes it a lot easier and cleaner as far as Narav versus the annual event and all that stuff. So it was just a logistical decision that made a lot of sense, especially since it's not one of the core 6 picks.
And then we don't have to ship them, Brian, and you don't have to mess up taping boxes.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into getting. We've got our 6 core picks, and then we keep running into these bonus barrels that pop up from time to time, and it definitely is a lot on. I know Lance does a lot for shipping, and you guys do a lot for volunteering to come and help ship as well. So this kind of cuts all that out of the equation and simplifies things.
Yeah, because I do not like when we ship 2 barrels at the same time. It is not fun. So I'm so glad we're going through them for this one.
Yep.
And I think it turned out to be a really good thing because we were able to get 2 barrels because Jason, for example, is opening it up to his channel as well. And we have to be able to sell it all. So that was another bonus.
Yep.
Earl asks, has Ben Holiday been thrown on the back burner? For now, it has. We are working on our final pick, which would be hopefully a Bardstown Rye. That's what we're hoping. That's what we're trying to get locked in. But Ben Holiday was not super responsive in getting. We thought they were. We thought we had that locked down. But again, in the barrel pick world, you just never know. So so that is one. If we don't get it this year, we will be trying for that next year.
Yeah. And that could be just a timing thing. I mean, they may be inundated with requests for barrel picks, and we can follow up as much as we want, but if we're not getting communication and we can't secure dates and all that stuff, there's only so much we can do. So we won't stop trying on that one though, because I think we all want that pick. I'm
pretty positive we'll be able to get that pick for you guys. It's just a matter of when.
Matter of timing.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think that's it for news. You guys have any questions? If so, drop them in the chat before we get out of here. We're going a little longer than we typically go on a stream, but yeah.
Did you want to talk about the charities for next year, Josh?
Oh yeah. I didn't update my notes. I thought I would remember that. Yeah.
I just remembered it when we were sitting here.
Yeah. A huge shout out to Dustin, Mike, and the Bourbon Engineer for being our charity committee. You guys watching this submitted nominations for charities for year 2. And the charity committee put together an entire rubric to grade charities based on their financial visibility and forthrightness, the impact that the dollars that we're donating make, everything. And, any of the guys from the charity committee can talk to you more about their process. And they wanted to make it, they put a lot of work into this, and they wanted to make it in such a way where they weren't deciding on an emotional basis, but they were deciding based on actual, like, what made the biggest impact for our charity dollars. And there was some very close competition in a couple of the categories, but we are, for year 2, keeping all the charities. They're going to be the same as year 1. So mental health will be To Write Love on Our Arms, American Cancer Society for Cancer, Make-A-Wish for Children, and Folds of Honor for our military charities. And it was like a single point difference in some categories. So we don't have any change in that regard. Some of that gives me warm and fuzzies from being at the annual event and seeing how much of a difference that these charities made. Some of it makes me want to, give all of the board members here, especially our founding members here, a round of applause for the fact that we all picked 4 charities that turned out to be really, really good charities, on paper. Like, you can quantifiably measure that they make an impact in their field of support. So yeah, these guys went through the ringer on these charities, and my hat's off to them. My hat is off to them.
Thanks to everybody on that committee. That's awesome.
Yes. And next year, again, if you have charities that pop up over the year that you're thinking about, make sure you note those down. And then when we take nominations after year 2 is over with, when we take nominations for year 3, make sure you submit those. But yeah, it's going to be a wonderful year.
I'll add to that, Josh. I thought we might get more submissions, but in hindsight, the fact that we didn't may mean not everybody, but most people were pretty satisfied with the charities we were donating to. And like you said, it does give me warm fuzzies that, we met these people at the year-end event, had relationships with them. NBC gave us a barrel at the year-end event. American Cancer Society donated the cancer Freddie No signed bottle that we still need to auction off. There is something to say about building relationships with those charities, but yeah, I thought when we submitted that there would be a lot more submissions, but there wasn't, which made me think a lot of people must be happy with the way things went, which that makes me really happy. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see Todd K in the chat saying, I'm on vacation the last 2 weeks of this month. I plan on going up to hang with James at NBC. I'm enjoying some Blurred Lines right now. Hey, man, come on up on September the 26th and hang out, because we're going to be there picking a barrel. So you can kind of just hang out with the group, and we're going to go get some barbecue and have a bottle share afterwards and all kinds of stuff. So September 26th. Let me make sure that's right. I'm almost sure that's right. Yes, September 26th.
That's the night before my birthday too, so come see us.
There we go. All right, Lance.
Yeah, and by the way, if you're not on the pick team, but you are in the area or will be in the area, we're gonna be hanging out. So make sure just because you're not a part of a pick team, we randomize and try to make that as fair and equitable as we can. But come on and hang out.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be a fun month, guys, with all the barrel picks we got going on, and hopefully get some bottles coming in soon. It's fall. It's the best time of year for bourbon. So I'm excited.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
And if anyone is in the Nashville area and wants info on the bottle share for that Thursday night, just email me. I'll fill you in.
There it is.
Oh my God. Ooh. That has gone down as probably one of my top 3 bottles ever. It really has. It is. I had some last night, and I'm just like, my goodness, that's a good
so
bottle.
Good. Yeah.
Now we do have to address a couple of things before we get off stream. Corey asks, "It's exciting." He says it's exciting to see Dan not sitting in his low-vis secret squirrel surveillance vehicle. and then EJ said, "Who is that dusty guy in full light? Too used to seeing him in these streams sitting in a surveillance vehicle trying not to stand out."
Right.
I forgot to grab the Four Roses bottle earlier from here. So I stream from here and whatever. It's not my house. It's my grandparents' house. Nobody lives here. So, but typically on those other nights, I'm sitting in my car in front of my house because my kids are going to be too loud. So I figure I got to have my own kind of quiet space. So
a mobile studio.
Mobile studio. Yeah.
And let's cheers to Dan for getting a promotion today. Cheers, buddy.
Yeah.
Hey.
Cheers, guys. Appreciate that.
Now Dan will have more time off. Probably not.
It'll be about the same.
Okay. All right. Good.
But more responsibility though. So it's whatever.
Well, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
I don't see any other questions.
Good stuff. Yeah, I think that's about it. Mike, I'll get with you off stream. We'll talk about that. He asked about a rotating 5th charity, which was something that the charity committee had proposed. But I think our stance is, supporting our 4 pillars, and it's hard to, after that annual event, man, and seeing the impact that these charities make. We just want to make sure we're pouring into them, and
I think we discussed
as much as we can.
I think we tossed around too, giving it another year to see what this year does as far as funds go, because we are a little ahead of where we were last year. And so after we get this second year under our belt, we might have more options to do that.
Yeah. And part of that's the charity auction at the annual event. using barrels like the Four Roses barrel to raise more money, making the exodus from Patreon over to, a far lesser fee structure. All these things are going to give us more room to make, bigger picture decisions that we just don't have the cash flow for right now. But it's not a no forever. It's just for right now.
And a huge shout out to all of you guys, because last year we were able to donate 40,000, which was our goal, which was amazing. And we're already ahead of that, I think, this year. I mean, no promises, because who knows what could happen, but we're in a lot better shape right now than we were this time last year. So that's all thanks to you guys. It's thanks to the year-end event, the charity auction. NBC donating a barrel was huge. The Four Roses barrel was huge. All that stuff adds up, and it's just, I'm really excited about where we're going.
Sorry, Lance, I'm not trying to laugh, but that last comment got me.
But Brad, those photos aren't online, but Lance said he'll send them to you privately.
Brad, I will definitely send you a picture of me in a Speedo, buddy. You asked, you get
it. Careful what you wish for.
That's funny. No, but Kim, I mean, I do. So now that the whole year-end event is done and we're on stream, you did an amazing job with the whole planning of everything. And I know, I mean, we've already started talking about some things for year two, and it gives me goosebumps to thinking about it. So, thank you for being on top of that and being amazing. So looking forward to it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Heck yeah.
You're here.
Absolutely.
I've actually got some year-end event homework for year two homework and research to do tomorrow.
Oh, that's tomorrow, huh?
I moved it up.
Oh, you moved. I was gonna say I thought it was the 11th.
It was, but I moved it up. We'll talk.
Okay.
So we had a scheduling conflict.
Okay.
Yeah. But yep, going to check out some venues and see if we can work some fun stuff out for you guys. We got some awesome plans in the works.
Heck yeah.
That is all too early to say anything because it's still TBD.
Yes. Everything is up in the air right now.
Everything is, yes.
We're just know that we're thinking about you guys, and we're putting in it wasn't, we had the year-end event, and then like 2 weeks later we had a board meeting, and Kim is like, so year two. And we're like, hey Kim, can we just appreciate year one first? And she's like, we can do them both at the same time. Year two.
It is tough to find the time to let it sit in, right?
Yeah.
Like to gather everything and to see everything unfold the way it did is impressive. So
Yep.
For sure.
Kim, you're such a huge asset, man. You're just 100%. Awesome.
She's the real VIP.
Yep.
It's everybody. It's everybody on the board. It's everybody who's members. It's everybody who cares about charity and great people and community and whiskey.
Yeah.
And whiskey. That's right.
Yep. Cheers to that.
Cheers to that, man. For sure.
Yep. Cheers.
Can't end it on a better note than that right there.
Nope. We love you guys. Thanks for everything you guys do. It's a fun ride, man. We're off to a great start.
Sure is.
Have a good night, everybody.